This week on The Travel Detective, it's got some of the best beaches in all of Florida, but I'll take you beyond the shoreline. Hold on, everybody. Cut the tape. That was then. This is now. We were first here in Fort Myers, focusing on the hidden gems of this beach community. But 2 weeks after we left, Hurricane Ian came roaring through and devastated this town and the islands surrounding it. But now we're back, chronicling the rebuilding, the resilience, and the hope that it will take to put all the pieces back together in one of Florida's favorite beach destinations. That's our cover story. Plus, we'll stay in Florida to explore America's oldest city, a community that fiercely preserves its history and its architecture, with great stories and even better storytellers. I'll share with you some of my hidden gems of St. Augustine. And then, when it comes time to book an international flight, you probably search out the usual suspects. Turns out there are other options and some very special flights, if you know where to look. I'm Peter Greenberg. All that and more on this edition of The Travel Detective. On the southwestern coast of Florida, along the banks of the Caloosahatchee River, is Fort Myers, a city of only around 90,000 residents, but which every year draws nearly 5 million tourists to the area. It's a favorite of northern snowbirds during the winter months, including such famous names as Henry Ford and Thomas Edison, whose estates are still a top attraction. Most of all, people come to Fort Myers to experience the outdoors, with 50 miles of white sandy beaches and more than 100 barrier and coastal islands, with everything from fishing to kayaking to spring training baseball games, plus a revitalized downtown. Fort Myers is on track to have its best tourism year ever, but everything changed on September 28, 2022. Just after 3 p.m., Hurricane Ian made landfall on Fort Myers, a Category 4 storm with sustained winds of more than 150 miles per hour and a storm surge of nearly 20 feet. In the wake of the storm's path, lives were changed forever. What Hurricane Ian ripped apart in a matter of hours may require years to rebuild. The scale of the catastrophic impact was staggering. 5,000 homes destroyed, another 30,000 damaged, with a death toll of 149 people. It was Florida's deadliest hurricane since 1935, and the estimated cost of the damages has reached almost $113 billion. Today, in every corner of Fort Myers, residents have their stories of loss and survival. Wendy Schnapp attempted to protect her equipment rental business from the coming storm.
We were here tying down, getting ready to go, not having any idea that it was going to be the severity that it ended up being. Actually, we have the line marked right here, how high the water was. So everything that was on the lower level was destroyed.
In a tourism-dependent economy, this was devastating.
Devastating. So this should be our busiest time of year. You and I should be standing here surrounded by people. So absolutely devastating.
But the good news is you're able to rebuild.
We are going to rebuild. Been here for 20 years and I'm going to be here for 20 more.
We have so many friends who swam out of their houses.
Jackie Lisak is a lifelong resident of Fort Myers Beach. She lost her home and the boutique hotel she owned, along with countless personal landmarks.
I remember when I was a little girl, we used to come to the Dairy Queen, right where I'm standing right here. And those memories are so strong, but it's hard to wrap your head around the fact that it's all gone.
I remember standing on that pier.
On the pier, yes.
And that's gone.
Right, our iconic pier, and one of the symbols of our island, one of our crown jewels.
And on the beach, an impromptu collection of lost and found items has become a place of remembrance.
This is a memorial for the folks that we lost. It's a memorial for the town that we lost and our lifestyle that we lost. It's also a symbol for me of now we move forward from here.
I can see what you did there. It looks good.
Bill Wychulis helps run the Pink Shell Beach Resort in Fort Myers Beach. and he chose his own memento to honor the tragedy of Hurricane Ian.
You know, I've got my first tattoo. You play poker. The 7 and 2 is the worst hand you can be dealt. Unfortunately, Ian was the worst hand we could be dealt right now. But it's my philosophy is how do you play those cards and how do you make the best out of them? That's what we're trying to do. I think you're going to see what would have been 40 years of development happen in 4 years, and improving the area and the resorts.
Some of the fast recovery is thanks to the action of local government officials, like Holly Smith, the mayor of Sanibel.
Our lifeline to our home was severed in 5 areas, just catastrophic.
And you rebuilt that causeway in record time.
In less than a month, we had that bridge built. That was a game changer on how everything would happen.
Hope for recovery can also be found just by looking at nature's example.
It's a beautiful day.
When we came to Fort Myers 2 weeks before the hurricane, we visited 6 Mile Cypress Slough, a 3,500-acre nature preserve just 20 minutes from downtown, guided by David Yates, who helped originally found the park in the 1970s.
A lot of people call it a swamp.
That was then, and this is now, where aside from some trees that lost their tops, there's little evidence of the hurricane. Richard Bauer, the supervisor at the slough, led us down the boardwalk trail to show how they weathered the storm.
We didn't have a whole lot of damage here. Most of our native plants and animals are well adapted to life in areas that get hit by hurricanes.
So this is really a great example of how nature comes back.
Absolutely. These ecosystems are made to recover from things like this. And we were able to actually be one of the first parks we were able to open up, which was very beneficial for the community because it gave people a place to go forget their troubles.
Creating a place for community healing was very important at Tutti Pazzi. It's a restaurant owned and operated by the husband and wife team of Pasquale and Liana Russo. After losing the lower level of their restaurant, they paid their employees to act as the cleanup and repair crew.
So when we decided to reopen, we really did it for the residents, and we just needed a place where people could feel normal. When we opened on that first day, it was just an outpouring of people from the community who had not seen each other. People were crying, hugging. It felt like a huge therapy session. And it just felt really warm to know that we were able to create that place for people to connect again.
Just as this tragedy has connected the residents and made them stronger, they're now focused on building a stronger Fort Myers.
Everything now, when we talk about the rebuilding, in every conversation, we talk about resiliency. How to help nature be more resilient, how to build our structures more resilient, so that hopefully if something like this were to happen again, we would have less impact, and that's so important.
As much as the community is working together, there's no getting around the fact that a resort town needs travelers in order to fully recover.
The economy does rely on people coming in and spending their time and using this as a vacation destination. Quite candidly, we need it. And so I would encourage anyone who is having reservations about coming, please do come down, give us a try, and invest in our community so that we can build back better.
So what you're really saying is if you're having reservations, make reservations.
Exactly.
So many people around the world love our island, and we want everyone to be a part of our recovery. It's going to be a long-term recovery, but I know what we're going to be on the other side is going to be amazing, and it's going to be a model for the world to see on how you can rebuild an island that's still in harmony with nature.
While Fort Myers was hard at work rebuilding, we traveled north to St. Augustine on the Atlantic coast, a small city of close to 15,000 residents. They suffered some flooding from Hurricane Ian, but they were spared from catastrophic damage. Along the northeast coast of Florida sits St. Augustine, a small city of close to 15,000 residents. St. Augustine has what many travelers look for in a Florida destination: white sandy beaches, music festivals, trendy bars and restaurants, even yoga retreats. But what sets St. Augustine apart is the history. Founded in 1565 by Spanish explorer Pedro Menendez de Avilés, this is the oldest continuously inhabited city in America, established over 40 years earlier than the first English settlement at Jamestown. Here you can walk down the oldest street in America, Avilés Street, a center for St. Augustine's artists and artisans. The city was ruled by the Spanish for 250 years, and in 1808, walls were built as a line of defense for the city, and remnants of the original city gate can still be seen today at the entrance of St. George Street. Once the main thoroughfare of St. Augustine, it is now a pedestrian-only street, which leads to the town plaza, designed in the same style as cities found throughout Spain. The Plaza de la Constitución is the oldest dedicated public space in North America, and it's still a gathering place for the community, with a monument at the center honoring the Spanish Constitution. From there, it's history in every direction. The Cathedral Basilica, home to the oldest Catholic parish in America, St. Augustine's only skyscraper, built in the 1920s. It inspired height regulations by the City Commission to prevent additional skyscrapers from ruining the city character. And just steps away is the former Ponce de Leon Hotel, considered at the time it was constructed in the 1880s to be the most luxurious resort in the world. It was the dream of Henry Flagler, the man who co-founded Standard Oil with John D. Rockefeller. He saw St. Augustine's potential as a resort destination. The hotel operated from 1888 to 1967, when it then became home to a small liberal arts school, Flagler College. And even if you're not enrolled there, it's worth a campus visit just for the most opulent college cafeteria you'll probably ever see. What was once the formal dining room of the hotel still holds 48 of the building's 79 Tiffany stained glass windows, the largest collection in the world. Even before the hotel was built, people were coming to St. Augustine to see another spot with Ponce de Leon's name on it. It's the Ponce de Leon's Fountain of Youth Archaeological Park. And this site has been a tourist attraction as far back as the 1860s. It's the Fountain of Youth. Now, Ponce de Leon never found it. Nobody else did either. But miraculously, it's appeared here as a tourist attraction. And many of the 6 million people who visit St. Augustine every year, they come here. So you sort of go with it. And since I'm already here, do I look any younger to you? If you're looking for souvenirs, come here. But if you're looking for the actual history, go 15 miles north on the A1A and look for this hidden opening to beach access and this statue. And you're at the Ponce de Leon Overlook.
All right, imagine, it's 1513. There's 3 Spanish ships coming up the Florida coast. Don Juan Ponce de Leon was sent here to explore and claim whatever he found for Spain.
So that's not legend, that's real.
This is real. Let me take you somewhere else and we can talk about the legend.
Chad Light has spent years sifting through the legends of St. Augustine.
The Spanish already knew that there was land here, but it had not been legally claimed by anyone. Never mind that other people were already living here. That's not how they thought of things. They needed someone they trusted to claim it, and that was Don Juan Ponce de Leon.
According to a historian named Herrera, Ponce de Leon spotted this land on March 27, 1513, claiming it for Spain and naming it Florida, from the Spanish word for flowers. Based on records, Ponce de Leon's offshore position was right here at 30 degrees, 8 minutes north latitude.
So this overlook is the only public access to the closest spot to 30 degrees 8 minutes. The area itself is much overlooked for its significance.
So where does the Fountain of Youth come into all of this?
The Spanish historian Herrera, who wrote about 30 degrees 8 minutes, that part is factual, it's historic, but he also wrote about the Fountain of Youth, and that Ponce de Leon was looking for it. So the source for the history and the source for the legend are the same source. They are welded together. You cannot separate the two.
The Fountain of Youth story appeared only after Ponce de Leon's death, and some believe it was concocted to ridicule the explorer. However the legend started, it distracts from the true history of how Ponce de Leon helped shape Florida's destiny. That fort is the Castillo de San Marcos, one of the most popular destinations in St. Augustine. with around 500,000 visitors a year. Built to defend the main waterway entrance of the city, the Castillo's walls are made up of coquina, a local limestone formed from shells and sand, strong enough to withstand cannon fire. The Castillo wasn't old St. Augustine's only line of defense. To explore the history without all the crowds, just drive 30 minutes south and look for this sign, and then catch a ferry. Hey, Captain.
So this building looks rather unchanged, but actually this building historically was coated in a bright white plaster and decorated with red T-tails, the same colors as the Spanish flag. Having the fort those colors, it was a symbol to enemy ships approaching that they were now in Spanish territory.
This is Fort Matanzas, named for the river you have to cross in order to reach it. Ferry is free and operated by the National Park Service, led by guides like Ranger Caroline.
Fort Matanzas defends the southern entrance to the city of St. Augustine.
It seems pretty small.
It is pretty small, but it's the perfect size for what you needed at this location. The Matanzas Inlet, it's very shallow. Only smaller ships could get through. That means they couldn't hold the bigger cannons that are necessary for destroying a fort's walls. So while Fort Matanzas is very small, it's extremely effective.
Built in 1742 and divided into 3 levels. And the first stop is all the firepower.
Welcome to the gun deck.
Wow, real cannons.
Real cannons, 4 real cannons. We have 2 reproductions and 2 original cannons over here.
And they would actually shoot the ships trying to come in.
That's right.
Inside is the enlisted men's barracks, with the officers' quarters on the next level. But the real treat is on the top.
Now this is what people really enjoy when they come to Fort Matanzas, this view.
By the time Fort Matanzas was retired from active use in 1821, it had changed hands from the Spanish to the British, back to the Spanish, and finally to the United States, which made it a national monument to preserve the history.
Now this fort was attacked a couple times.
It was.
Each time this fort fired a warning shot and the enemy turned around.
That's all they had to do was fire the warning shot.
That's it. They knew that the guns that they had here at Fort Matanzas were much bigger than the guns that they had on those small ships coming through that inlet.
So nobody gets by here.
Nobody gets by here.
Not all of St. Augustine's history is still standing. North of town, there's a small visitor center that tells the little-known story of Fort Mose. But my recommendation? Find someone like Thomas Jackson, the vice president of the Fort Mose Historical Society, to take you out on this boardwalk, leading to a seemingly empty marsh that was once a refuge for those fleeing slavery.
A lot of black history in Florida especially is intertwined with Spanish history. When you talk about runaway slaves, we like to talk about freedom seekers. Most of the freedom seekers that made their way down to Spanish Florida came from the Carolinas, working as slaves on the plantation. Once they made it here, they could live free here at Fort Mose.
On this site in the 1700s is where Fort Mose stood, the first legally sanctioned freed black settlement in what is now the United States. To live here, fugitives from the British colonies had to convert to Catholicism, then join the militia to protect St. Augustine.
There was a major battle fought here on this site, which actually helped save St. Augustine from being taken over by the British.
The militia of previously enslaved black residents helped push the British out of Spanish Florida. And today, reenactments are performed for the public. Fort Mose is not the only part of St. Augustine's black history waiting to be discovered. In the neighborhood of Lincolnville, many people do not know this building, or that it's even a museum.
People come in and they say, I didn't have any idea that St. Augustine played such a pivotal role in the civil rights movement. As a matter of fact, if it had not been for some of those awful things that happened in St. Augustine, the fight might have gone on a lot longer before we got the Civil Rights Act of 1964.
Regina Gale Phillips is the executive director for the Lincolnville Museum and Cultural Center, housed in what was originally St. Augustine's first black high school.
This Lincolnville community was one of those freedmen towns that was established by blacks right after the Civil War, going back to 1866.
Lincolnville became a center both for black residents and the black business community, and many notable civil rights protests, like the incarceration of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and the dramatic images of acid being used to repel protesters at a whites-only motel swimming pool. These stories made national headlines at the time. So why are they so little known compared to what happened in other landmark civil rights cities?
Places like Selma, Birmingham, and people in those communities help to preserve those stories is why we have them. People in this community suppress those stories because people were embarrassed about what happened here. And we want to make sure that their stories are not lost. You can't talk about why St. Augustine is the oldest city in America without talking about the African American community here that came and helped to build it and make it what it is.
There's so much rich history in St. Augustine to take in and ponder. And a great place to do that thinking is just 20 minutes north along the coast.
After being in the busyness of the rest of Florida, I just come out here and exhale.
In addition to coming here to relax, Carl Tuvalu also leads kayak trips along the Guana River.
We're right in the middle of the Guantanamo-Matanzas National Estuarine Research Reserve.
Say that 3 times fast.
Yeah, I know. We call it the GTM. We're in 73,000 acres of land and water for recreation, wildlife viewing, hunting, fishing.
Wow. And no development.
No development here. And I don't believe that will ever happen because it's protected federal lands.
The GTM Reserve was established in 1999, covering 30 miles north and south of St. Augustine, with the reserve acting as a natural filter.
This water flows to and from the ocean through the St. Augustine Inlet. It brings fresh salt water in here and it cleans out any of the contaminants that came in off the land either through development or erosion.
Trekking off into nature can be intimidating for some travelers, but the benefits outweigh the concerns.
The northerners or the tourists might have fears of dangerous wildlife, dangerous conditions out here. Obviously they're there and you have to pay attention to them, but the benefits of the sun, the water, the salt, just being out amongst the wildlife, it's all here.
And on the water, it's a perfect place to reflect.
There is a world out there beyond the developed world. It makes me think of my place in nature and of man's place in nature in general. We're one here.
And that quiet solitude of nature is just one of the many hidden gems of St. Augustine, Florida. As the price of international air travel continues to rise, your best overseas flight option might be with an airline you've never heard of. Depending on where you're going, these little-known airlines can offer nonstop flights at a great fare. Here are just a few. For those heading to France, French Bee flies multiple fare-friendly routes from the U.S. to Paris, out of Los Angeles, New York, and Miami, with fares averaging about $700. They even fly Los Angeles to Tahiti nonstop. For other European destinations, Norse Atlantic Airways offers affordable routes from New York to London, or to Oslo from New York and Fort Lauderdale. Their New York to London round-trip fares have been as low as $318. If you're looking to go to Tokyo, Japan-based low-cost carrier Zip Air has routes from 3 U.S. cities: Los Angeles, San Jose, and Honolulu. For those of you heading south of the border to Mexico, ultra-low-cost carrier Viva Aerobus has multiple low-fare options: Chicago to Guadalajara, Los Angeles to Mexico City, and Houston to Leon. And there are many more great affordable routes to be found. On the new airline Play, Washington, D.C. to Reykjavik in Iceland. There's Level, with round-trip flights from New York to Barcelona. On German carrier Condor, round-trip from Seattle to Zagreb. These airlines may not show up on your internet search. They may not have daily frequencies. And some are just seasonal schedules. And the service? Well, it's basic. but the price is more often than not right. That does it for this week. I'll see you next time on another edition of The Travel Detective.
Oceans are our lifeblood. Covering 71% of the planet, they produce more than half the oxygen in the atmosphere. But now, the oceans are becoming a danger to us. Sea levels worldwide have been rising as a result of climate change. A lot is at stake, especially for the Pacific nation of Tuvalu. If the ocean continues to rise, it's at risk of being completely submerged. Will Tuvalu be the first country to be wiped off the map by climate change? Our oceans are vast, spanning 2/3 of the planet and accounting for 97% of our water. But now, our seas have become monsters because of climate change.
As a storm chaser and adventurer, I've spent years traveling all over the world documenting the most extreme forces of nature. But now, I'm going after the bigger picture of climate change.
In the last 5 years, I've witnessed increasingly violent storms, flooding, and hurricanes that have devastated communities in Thailand, the Philippines, and the USA. More and more, I'm seeing that much of our extreme weather is directly connected to climate change. Scientists agree that oceans are getting hotter and higher, making them unpredictable and dangerous.
The last 12 months have brought some really bad news in terms of sea level rise. It's just rising fast. Now it's 3.2 millimetres a year. Places like Tuvalu and the Pacific Islands, the low-lying atoll countries, are in real trouble. I mean, they will go under the sea. At some point this century, they'll go underwater.
I'm on my way to the tiny island nation of Tuvalu to investigate this firsthand. Located in the Pacific Ocean, midway between Australia and Hawaii, Tuvalu is a cluster of 9 islands. My arrival here in Tuvalu is ominous. There's torrential rain and the whole area is flooded.
This is the wet season, and we're in an area that's a South Pacific convergent zone where you've got different wind currents coming together, which then go up, creating rain and thunderstorms and tremendous amounts of flooding, it seems.
With only 10 square miles of dry land, Tuvalu is one of the smallest countries in the world. An average elevation of 6 feet makes Tuvalu extremely vulnerable to storms and sea level rise. The rains are incredible. All over the island, people are struggling to keep their homes dry.
Usually when this place floods out, it's from the sea, which is about 30 yards that way. Today, torrential thunderstorms, freshwater flooding. This island can't catch a break.
I meet with local meteorologist Tuwala Katea.
So it's been a busy 24 hours for you. You've never seen this much rain in 24 hours.
And we measure around 347 millimeter in one day.
That sounds like something you'd get on a mountainside in a cyclone.
That's history. And it's not linked to any tropical cyclone or what. I mean, it's just a rain band, a convection zone, really active right on top of Tuvalu.
Just perfectly aligned right on top of the island for hours and hours and hours.
Tuvalu experiences seasonally high tides that the locals call king tides. But in the last few years, these tides have been changing.
We call it king tides. That's the normal high tide. The normal high tide, but it's higher than normal.
If the king tide was yesterday, combined with the storm and the flooding, and maybe a little bit of surge from the storm, that would be catastrophic.
Yes, of course. Because of our elevation really low, so low-lying places and coastal areas get inundated and eroded.
It's not just you that's being affected, it's everyone else. It just so happens that your island is very low.
Yes.
So it's going to be seen here first.
We are the front line.
Tuvalu has few natural defenses against these high tides.
One thing the locals have done is to try and help prevent the king tides by putting these barrels filled with concrete. Of course, not really working so well here. A few of them been knocked down during a storm. The concept seems sound, but the implementation, I don't know.
The island can barely cope with tropical downpours, let alone more storms. This one has finally passed, but the damage on the island is long-lasting.
Yesterday there was some torrential rain like I haven't seen in a long, long time anywhere. And some of the houses here actually flooded out by that. It's not just seawater they have to worry about here, it's rainwater as well. So this place got totally flooded out yesterday?
Yeah, starting at 8 o'clock last night, the water started coming in and the family was totally sleeping. They didn't know what was happening till the neighbors called out. So around about 8, the water was all over here, going inside. It was flooded everywhere.
Let's take a look. Wow. Everything is up on tables.
This is the first time that they have experienced this and have been evacuated. They just put up everything that are useful for the family, like the refrigerators and everything, and put up high.
Where did they end up going?
They went up to the Tuvalu Red Cross.
Like many of the houses in Tuvalu, this house is located only 160 feet from the shore.
So could you imagine, with 5,000 or so people on this island, a major catastrophe?
If we have a 2 meters high king tide, it will just destroy us all.
The global sea level has been rising at a rate of 0.14 inches per year since the early 1990s, roughly twice the average speed of the preceding 80 years. It's a dangerous scenario. In the last century, the planet's temperature has risen at an alarming rate. Scientists have shown that human activities are driving temperatures up with our reliance on fossil fuels that emit greenhouse gases. As those gases trap more energy from the sun, oceans absorb more heat and expand. Climate scientists predict global temperatures will increase by 2 to 11 degrees Fahrenheit by the end of the century. Higher temperatures are also leading to increased melting of glaciers and polar ice caps, resulting in greater runoffs into the ocean and increasing sea levels. I asked climate scientist Elizabeth Holland more about the data.
We looked at solar radiation, we looked at rising sea level, we looked at the temperature of the oceans, we looked at the temperature of the atmosphere, we looked at the temperature of the land. Warming is unequivocal. We've been able to say more and more strongly that humans are causing the warming.
As ocean surface temperatures heat up, scientists predict an increase in the number of intense storms. The islands of Tuvalu are so low-lying and small, only 400 yards at the widest point, that they could easily be submerged.
This is basically it. I'm surrounded by ocean on 3 sides of me, with just a tiny spit of land connecting me to the island. Probably the most vulnerable point on one of the most vulnerable islands. You've got the lagoon side over here and the ocean side here. It's all converging on this one tiny spit. One thing that scientists are certainly in agreement about is that a lot of the heat that's trapped by greenhouse gases is getting absorbed by the oceans.
Let's see how warm the ocean is today.
Okay, so just over 80 degrees. As the water heats up, it will expand, and that actually contributes to global sea level rise. But that 80-degree point, that's sort of the threshold for tropical cyclone formation. You need water of at least that warm, and we've certainly got it here. Such a low-lying island is really at risk for not only sea level rise, but the torrential storm surge flooding that you can get during tropical cyclone season. I tell you, I wouldn't want to be standing right here during one.
Increased sea temperatures can have devastating consequences across the globe. Rising oceans are one of the deadliest results of climate change.
Warm water is the fuel for hurricanes, typhoons, tropical cyclones. And the warmer the seawater, the more we're going to see of these storms, and particularly the strength of these storms. A low-lying island like Tuvalu is particularly at risk. Today, we've got just a regular stormy day, and already this wind-driven surge is causing tremendous waves to crash much higher than the regular high tide. So to be on this island during a cyclone, it would totally swamp the island, and they do get cyclones here.
Across the globe, we're already witnessing increasingly violent storms.
But what we can now say with absolute clarity is that climate change is a very strong influence on these extreme weather events, and in some cases, the strongest influence.
It's not just low-lying islands that are vulnerable to hurricanes. New York City, which is only 33 feet above sea level, was brought to a standstill by Hurricane Sandy. I was in New York for Sandy, and even though I've been an active storm chaser for over 15 years, it was one of the most intense storms I've ever experienced.
The storm surge during Sandy was 13 feet above normal. It was one of the most devastating and expensive natural disasters in U.S. history.
117 people were killed, and it cost the U.S. $65 billion.
It created an unprecedented surge for that part of the world.
51 square miles of the city were flooded. That's 17% of the city landmass. More than 440,000 New Yorkers were living in the areas that Sandy flooded. I watched the storm come in from Rockaway Beach.
I was able to go up onto the boardwalk, which was maybe 10 feet above the beach, and I knew that the place was going to be completely demolished. I could see the violent waves just churning away, and I knew that the winds were going to shift as the storm got further inland, and that's exactly what happened. We knew we had to get out of there, or else we wouldn't get out of there.
I drove to higher ground, but all around me, whole neighborhoods in Queens and Brooklyn were underwater.
Such a storm used to only happen about once every 100 years, but now we're seeing these devastating storms more and more often.
Only 1 year later, on the other side of the world in the Philippines, Typhoon Haiyan hit, killing over 6,000 people.
Typhoon Haiyan was probably the strongest storm to ever make landfall. It was a Category 5 typhoon that hit the city of Tacloban directly. The storm surge with that was completely devastating. It came in like a tsunami. The Philippines gets hit quite frequently. They're used to typhoons. They've never seen anything like this one. It was so devastating that it was almost beyond comprehension, the level of damage and destruction that was caused by this storm. And I think that as sea levels get warmer and higher, it's inevitable we're putting ourselves at greater risk to the wrath of these marine storms, whether it's a hurricane, a typhoon, a tropical cyclone. They're all feeding off of this warm ocean water. And the sea surface temperatures have just been going up and up and up. It's not a matter of if, but when a major coastal city like Miami or Tampa gets hit by a major hurricane.
The danger on Tuvalu isn't just from these massive storms. There's also a serious threat from below. I've come to Tuvalu in the South Pacific to witness firsthand the effects of climate change.
For a little bit of perspective, about 80% of the island is no more than 4 feet above sea level. The highest point being about 15 feet, and about 40% of the population lives within 100 yards of the ocean. If there's any place in the world that is at the mercy of the sea, it's this place right here.
The rising seas are also forcing farmers to abandon their crops. Salt water from higher tides is soaking through the ground, contaminating the underground source of fresh water and destroying crops. Indigenous food, such as pulaka and coconut, are being destroyed. Reverend Tafui Lusama is deeply concerned with the impact of rising sea levels.
If salt water enters into it, it kills all our traditional plants. Land and the sea are the sources which sustain our livelihood daily. You lose your land, you lose your life.
Tonight, I'm joining the Tira Taula family for a traditional home-cooked meal. But foods like this are becoming harder to harvest.
This is a steamed fish. Definitely very hot. Red fruit and banana with talolo, cooked with talolo.
Local foods may soon be a thing of the past.
What a treat to enjoy some South Pacific hospitality. Going into someone's home, having a home-cooked meal. It's the best.
Our people can no longer depend on our traditional way of life. So we are left with no option but to turn into a market-based lifestyle.
With traditional crops being threatened by rising oceans, locals are relying on more processed foods.
With all of these changes that have been going on, it's become more and more difficult for the farmers here to grow some of the traditional food crops. And especially since World War II, they've become quite dependent on foreign-made processed food, and doesn't really help them in their struggle for food security, which is becoming a big issue here in Tuvalu.
The country now imports 80% of its food, which is costly to the islanders.
We're Pacific Islanders. We have a lot of ties to our land, our ocean. Our identity is very much built around how we relate to our land, how we relate to our ocean, and all of that is threatened, right?
People have lived in Tuvalu for 2,000 years, but some islanders are now leaving, scared that climate change and rising sea levels will make life on the island nearly impossible.
Our identity as a people will disappear, will die out. If I am relocated because of climate change and my country has gone down, where do I belong? I have no roots.
Tuvalu is not responsible for the catastrophe it's facing. It's no surprise the largest emitters of man-made greenhouse gases are the world's largest countries: China, United States, the EU, and India.
Here in the islands, we contribute the least to greenhouse gas emissions, yet we're the most affected.
Tuvalu, the fourth smallest country in the world, has almost no carbon emissions, but they're at the front line.
As those in the developed world drive their cars and turn up their heat or decide to build one more coal-fired power plant, it is the Tuvalus of the world that will go underwater because of those choices.
Environmental activists are taking up the cause, encouraging the people of the Pacific Islands to fight for changes on a local and global scale. In 2014, they took their fight to Australia and blocked the largest coal port with canoes to make their voices heard.
Right now, that's the message that we want to get out there. Climate change is real, we are living with it, and sooner or later the world needs to change if we don't start demanding that the world transitions to more renewable sources of energy.
There's no plan B.
There's no plan B, there's no planet B.
But Tuvalu is fighting back. In an effort to hold on to their island, the locals have raised money from an unlikely source.
Each country has its own internet suffix. .de for Germany, .au for Australia, .ca for Canada. Well, here in Tuvalu, they've got .tv. And .tv has become so popular, especially amongst people in the television world, that it has quite an appeal.
The money raised by selling the suffix goes into repairing roads, improving barriers, and planting mangrove trees to fight against coastal erosion.
If worse comes to worst and Tuvalu disappears under the waves, that suffix will still exist, creating what could possibly be the world's first virtual country existing only in cyberspace.
While Tuvalu is disappearing, it's far from alone in its coastal erosion.
The problem is not confined to Tuvalu. It's not peculiar to Tuvalu only. It's a global problem.
The Maldives are also under threat. A unique archipelago made up of 2,000 islands could almost disappear into the sea by the end of the century if nothing is done to curb global warming. It's not just low-lying island communities that are at risk. With predictions that sea levels could rise by up to 6 feet over the next century, South Florida will be badly affected. A 3-foot rise would take away a third of the land, and a 6-foot rise would submerge half the area. The condos that line Miami's waterfront would disappear.
What do you think is the biggest misconception about climate change in general?
The biggest misconception is that because it's a slow process, we can wait to take action. Because climate change is a very slow process, but we're at that tipping point. We need to take action today.
The people of Tuvalu are desperate for the rest of the world to sit up and pay attention.
What does the world need to know about Tuvalu?
I think it's very important that that we are part of the world. And I think that as a Tuvaluan, Despite how small we are, we need to speak out that we do exist and we are parts of who you are, whether you are in Canada or in America. We are all part, we are the people of this world, and we need to be together and work together.
Just a month after I left Tuvalu, Cyclone Pam tore through the neighboring Pacific islands of Vanuatu, causing extensive damage. It also affected Tuvalu, forcing it to declare a state of emergency. This cyclone is a painful reminder that action must be taken. Global temperatures cannot be allowed to rise another 2 degrees. If countries around the world can find a way to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions, then Tuvalu and other countries in danger will have a fighting chance at survival.